Hey guys, welcome back to Supposedly Fun. I'm Greg. I am here today because I was tagged by Shawn the Book Maniac in the Two Books with One Stone book tag. So I'm here to do that today. I will link Shawn's video down below. He did the original, so there you go. Getting right into it, the first prompt is to talk about the second to last book that you read for me. That is Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. I talked about this book in my April wrap-up. I'm going to talk about it in another video where I get a little more in-depth. But for now, I will link the April wrap-up up here and down below as well. I really enjoyed this book, and if you want to hear more about it, you can, for now, check out the April wrap-up. But yeah, definitely liked it a lot. The next prompt is the second book from the top of your TBR, and you can look at your regular TBR list, your monthly TBR list, your Goodreads want to read, however you want to do it. I don't really keep a TBR list because I don't know, it's just not really the way my mind works. But I do have a shelf on Goodreads for books that I want to read, so I went to that. And the second book from the top was Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. I have never read any books by David Foster Wallace, even though the title of this YouTube channel is a nod to a title of one of his books. Infinite Jest is something that's been on my TBR for a really long time, but I haven't gotten to it because I know it's going to be a project. Anybody I know who has read this book, read it over a very long period of time. They described it as a lot of work. It's a very deep philosophical read. Something I would like to get to someday. I have no idea when I will do it. Next, we have 2-star reads. I looked at Goodreads at all of the books that I rated 2 stars, and apparently if I rate it 1 stars, I hated it enough that I have like this emotional memory to it. If I rate it 2 stars, it just completely disappears from my memory, because there were some books in 2 stars that I just remember thinking to myself, did I read that? So, you know, I dug through and I did find 2 that I remember. The first one is The Cider House Rules by John Irving. I like John Irving as a writer, but I have never read, I've only read 2 of his books, 1.5 of his books. I DNF'd The World According to Garp. I really wanted to finish it because I have a friend who says that's his favorite book and he loves it because of the ending. So I want to get back to it, but I haven't. But anyway, The Cider House Rules, to me, he's a great writer. Oh no, 2.5, because I also read that book, In One Person, I think? Which you can see what a great impression it left on me because I completely forgot that it exists. But anyway, The Cider House Rules, his writing is great, but there are so many weird tangents and distractions and things in this book, and to me, it's fully insane that John Irving wrote this book and then did the actual adapting of this book into the movie, because the movie is not perfect, but it streamlines all of that weird excess stuff that just gets in the way and gets rid of it. So the movie is a much more focused story without any of the weird, irritating things on the side. So you kind of know that John Irving is capable of that kind of editing, but he just does not do it in the book. In fact, there's a character in the book who is not in the movie at all, and the movie is better for not having that character. It's full distraction, it's weird, so I did not like this book. The other 2-star read I selected was Today Will Be Different by Maria Semple. Now, I know the cheese stands alone, and I'm the cheese. That was weird, but whatever. A lot of people like Maria Semple. I did not really like Where'd You Go, Bernadette? But it was fine. This is the one that really just kind of tripped my rage button. The thing about her books is that they're kind of about a lot of white nonsense. She features very affluent white characters who just can't get their lives together. And I am a white person, and I can't really read about that. And, you know, the ways in which these people live is there's a lot of white privilege, and yet they can't get their lives together, and to me that is just irritating. And this book took it to another level because she does things, like, for instance, her son in this book is named after an autocorrect mistake. She meant to suggest the name Timothy to her husband, I believe, and it came out Timby. So they thought that was funny, and they named their son Timby. And that is... No. I read that, and I just really wanted to check out of this book completely. I did finish it, did not like it. So there you go. Those are my 2-star reads. The next prompt is 2 great books by the same author. I immediately wanted to talk about either E.M. Forster or Kurt Vonnegut because they are my two favorite authors, but I've talked about them a lot on the channel. I wanted to talk about somebody I have not talked about a whole lot before, and that's Ha Jin. The first one is War Trash, which I believe was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize the year that it was released. If you have not read this book, do it. I love it so much. It is about Chinese soldiers who are being held in prisoner of war camps during the Korean War, and our main character finds himself in a unique position because he speaks English. So he becomes an intermediary between his compatriots and the people who are holding them captive. It is such a good book. I absolutely love it. It's about the cruelty of war. It's about humanity. It's just so good. It's a short story collection by Ha Jin called Ocean of Words. This is also about soldiers, but it's in a short story format, and it's just so good. I'll read you the back. And the characters in this thrilling collection of stories are Chinese soldiers who must constantly scrutinize the enemy, even as they themselves are watched for signs of the fatal disease of bourgeois liberalism. Such a good book. Next prompt is 2 bails or 2 books you wish you had bailed on, or 2 books you hated if you are morally opposed to DNFing a book. Well, I am not morally opposed to DNFing a book. I DNF books all the time. I will say there have been 2 series that I continued long after the thrill of the series had worn off, so I'm going to talk about those. The first one is the James Bond series of books by Ian Fleming. I don't know how exactly I got it in my head that I wanted to read every single one of Ian Fleming's James Bond books. My husband and I bought that DVD box set a couple of years ago with all of the James Bond movies at that point, and we watched them all, and I guess it kind of grew out of that. But the thing about the books is they are very problematic, rampant misogyny, rampant racism. They kind of glorify sexual assault, especially this one, which you may remember from my most hated books of all time, which I will link up top. Given all of that, there's no joy to be found in working your way through the entire series, and somehow I did it. The other one is the Dexter series by Jeff Lindsay. The first book was really good, the second book was good, and then it just went off the rails, and you could tell at a certain point that Jeff Lindsay was not interested in writing these books anymore because the same thing was happening in every book. It was lazy and it kind of insulting, but I stuck through to the end, mostly because of this book. Dexter's Final Cut was the second to last book. Kind of promised that the series was going to go in a different direction, and then the book after this was the conclusion, and there's no reward for hanging in there, especially when Jeff Lindsay clearly wasn't interested in the series at all. I should have bailed. I shouldn't have bothered finishing these, and I should have bailed on this by maybe book 4 or 5. So I regret finishing both of those series. And then the next prompt is 2 of my favorite reads so far this year. Well, I can tell you my 2 favorite books so far this year are The Gifts of the Body by Rebecca Brown and A Fine Balance by Roy Hinton Mystery. I read The Gifts of the Body back in February. This is a collection of interlocked stories about a home healthcare worker. It was published in 1994 or 1995, and this home healthcare worker works with AIDS patients who are dying. The author was a home healthcare worker who worked with AIDS patients, and it's about the disease, it's about the humanity of the people living with it and dying of it, and the pain and the guilt of the people who are left behind. It is so good. This is definitely going to be a contender for my favorite book of the year, as is A Fine Balance by Roy Hinton Mystery, which I read in April, which was a really good reading month for me. In fact, the top 5 books that I read in April, which again I will link below, are also going to be contenders for my favorite books of the year. But the one I liked the best was A Fine Balance. This is a book that's very much about humanity in inhumane times. The characters are 4 people who are living through the emergency, which is a real time in India that I didn't know about, in which a state of martial law, it's not martial law is not the word I'm looking for, but I'm going to go with it because it works, is declared with the prime minister, who is not named but was Indira Gandhi in real life, is allowed to rule by moral decree. It's a time of rampant corruption and murder and forced sterilization, and it's not pleasant. But at the center are these 4 people who are just trying to live decent lives. I absolutely love it. All right, the next prompt is 2 new favorite booktubers. Well, I myself am new to booktube. I have only been doing this for I did my first video at the end of December. so I'm not that long into it. So everybody's new to me on BookTube. So I guess the two people I'll shout out are two people who have done a lot to kind of introduce me to like BookTube and the kind of booktuber I want to be and the community. The first one is a Book Olive. I will link her profile down below. I really like her videos because she's extremely articulate and she has a very varied reading life. She reads all different kinds of books, genre books, classics, nonfiction books, and that's the kind of what I try to do. So I feel like she's the kind of booktuber I want to be. And the other one is Shawn the Book Maniac, who tagged me in this. I think he has done a lot to introduce me to the community aspect of BookTube, which is why I'm here. I used to be a bookseller at Borders, and I haven't been in a long time, but I always missed being able to talk to people about books. So that part has been wonderful, and Shawn is also a very unafraid of being honest, which I appreciate. The New Yorker and me will always love that. Next prompt is a book I've read twice. Traditionally I don't read books twice a whole lot. I've read all of the Harry Potter books more than once, but other than that, there aren't many except for The Catcher in the Rye, which I read for the first time when I was 15 or 16 on my own. I did not read it in school, and it was the perfect book at the perfect time. I was this depressed, angry teenager, and everything in it and Holden's point of view was perfectly how I felt about things. So I read this book every year at Christmas for about 6 or 7 years. And I read it at Christmas because that's when the book is set. And I remember when I was 21 or 22, all of a sudden, I read the book and I thought to myself, Holden is full of it. He has no idea what he's talking about. And I actually had an existential crisis after that because I really asked myself, did I sell out or did I grow up? Eventually, I determined I grew up. And although I still will always love the book for how much it meant to me at that time, I no longer relate to it. And I'm capable of reading it and being much more critical of it. But I'll always love it. The other one that I chose to talk about is The Godfather by Mario Puzo. I read this once on my own, and then I took a class in college on adapting books into film, and we talked about this. I did not have very high expectations when I read The Godfather, and it is actually a very good book. There is a subplot in the book that is just fully wild, like insane, and they've cut it out of the movies, and the movies are much better for it. Basically, the bridesmaid that Sonny is sleeping with at the beginning of the movie has her own subplot where she gets sent to Vegas to get her away from Sonny, and it's a mess. But this book they did a very smart job with the adaptation because they took the central storyline and did the first Godfather movie, and then they took the entire middle of the book as a flashback to Don Corleone's life in Italy, and they made that the second movie. It's a very interesting, well-written book. I've not read any of Mario Puzo's other books to see if they are equally good, but this was surprisingly good to me. Next, we have two fabulous quotes from books I have recently read. The first one I chose from Daisy Jones and the Six. It is, I think you have to have faith in people before they earn it. Otherwise, it's not faith, right? Well, I'm pretty sure I didn't note down which character said this. I think I know who it was, and I don't think I agree with them. But it did stop and really make me think, because that technically that is faith. Maybe it's just my experience of people that makes me want to push back and be like, nope. But it stopped and made me think, so when I had to pick a quote, it just immediately jumped out to me. The other one is from Conversations with Friends, Sally Rooney. It is, you live through certain things before you understand them. And I think that is a lot of what the book is about. It's another quote that really made me stop and think. So there you go. And then tag a number of booktubers. The total must be divisible by 2. I'm not going to tag anybody. If you want to do this, feel free. Go ahead. I wanted to do this. It sounded. I liked the prompts. So if you would like to do it, go forth and do it. If you have any feedback about these, if you disagree about the Dexter series, the James Bond books, let's talk about that. If you love any of these or hate any of these books that I've talked about, let's discuss that. Anyway, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you liked it, I hope you'll subscribe. If you're already subscribed, thank you for that. I'll be back again. And until then, happy reading.